Do you want the classic lightsaber, but you don't have hundreds of dollars to buy one? I can show you how to make one like this of your very own for $25 or less. And it even has sound, including clashes and light. Interested? Stand by. Here we go. Rey's lightsaber, Anakin's lightsaber, Luke Skywalker's lightsaber has been a project that has been bouncing around my head for a very long time. When I started making the Luke Skywalker cosplay or Luke Skywalker Halloween costume, I decided it was time to get serious on this lightsaber. I will try to share with you as many design options and thoughts that I have. The goal is to make this reasonably close for a reasonable price. I'm not going into hundreds of dollars. I'd like to keep it under $20 or $30. A lot of the parts that I have are scavenged. For example, these printouts for the hilt end, which is arguably the most complicated piece, for the band, yet another complicated piece, and then I drew this myself for the grip. It's hard to tell exactly how long this thing is. You look it up online and it's supposedly 28 centimeters. Mine is just around 29 centimeters. I'm going a little extra. So here's like the arch here. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to cut that. I might just start out with a hacksaw, cut this original off. The reason why I'm using this tube is because instead of spending $12 for a 12-inch tube, I was able to get this tube here for $3.50 on clearance. They just had a whole bunch of them sitting there at Home Depot, and so I took advantage of that. This is by far the crux of the build. Probably the hardest part of the build, because it's a very complex curve. I tried to go a little fast and I ended up dinging the top, so I had to slide this down. So be careful, don't rush it. What I did is I took this hacksaw and I just cut the major chunk out, and then I took this smaller hacksaw and just kind of went around ever so slightly, and then I would take this cutter and just peel it back so that we could give access to the saw. This saw bends a good bit, which is helpful. And then you finish it all off with a round file, half round file. It worked. I'm very happy with it. Make sure it's down smooth so it doesn't cut anybody. Now I'm going to make the inside ring. It goes around here and comes around to theoretically the top. I'm going to cut it out of this steel rod. This is a 1 1/4 inch rod. This is 1 1/2. I'm going to cut it 1 inch thick. This is from an old lampstand. So I'm using a lot of found parts in the spirit of Star Wars lightsabers. I've just taken some blue painter's tape so I know right where to cut it. I'm going to give a little bit of fudge factor, so if I have to sand it down and grind it down, I will, to get that perfect circle. I used some aluminum, 1 inch by 1 inch, and it's 1/16 inch angle. I cut 2 of these out. You can see that they're lopsided. What I did is I cut the original one out, and then I cut one to sit there, because in that way they're sitting on the same level. But you're going to be like this. Probably turn it around like this so you don't see the grooves. Run the blade for the lightsaber through there. So the next thing I'm going to do is the hilt handle. And what I have to do first is drill the hole for the rivet. This is a 3mm rivet, and it's about 25 centimeters from the end. Here's a key component here. It's usually windshield wiper blades, but I found that you could use this rubber floor mat. It has these grooves in here. You can see where I've experimented, cut some out, trimmed them off, and I still wasn't happy with how they looked. I knew they had to be a little more narrower, so I went and I took a couple of these black clamps and some rapid fuse, put it in there like this, got it thinner, but also it gave me the angle so that when I go to put it on here, it's lined up better. And then I'm going to rapid fuse. Here's a test run I did with rapid fuse. Rapid fuse the actual blade on there, and then this is a 3mm rivet that I've been testing out. You could use screws if you don't have rivets. I wouldn't think that you just paint a silver screw or use a silver screw and it would be just the same thing. Not so bad. This part here is very complicated. I'm going with the more traditional approach that's flatter with the squares on here, and this is the cutout that I referred to use here. Here I just drilled some 1/2-inch holes and put in some black tape and a little bit of gold marker to get this detail. That came out pretty well. But this sleeve here, which is this here, and then the rest of this build, I'm using a Lego, and I've drilled a hole, and I'm using some toggle bolts, a piece of a toggle bolt for this detail right here, and that's where the hole goes for that. And then for this groove, this actually has a little bit of spring to it. This was a really challenging piece, so I'm using the Lego and then a couple of these angle Legos that I happen to find. We got tons. I got this off of a Lego wall, so we got more than we know what to do with on these things. And then this detail, yet again, very complicated. I'm going to simplify it with a hose clamp. I'm going to paint this gold, and I'm going to have the background here. I'm going to paint this black after I paint this all silver. And it's going to go in there like that. Now you can see that the ridge is there, so I'm going to have to cut. But there's a little bit of a lip. Alright, so I'm going to use that detail. I've just sliced down a business card. Put it down in there like that to give me a little bit of a gap. And I'm going to turn this over and then use that as my cutting guide to know where to trim this. Then I'm going to sand the end bottom here a little bit so that it fits into this sleeve. Now the sleeve, once again, all this is like a spray bottle I found that worked and slid over the top of this really well. You could use plastic. You could actually just go straight to this aluminum tape that they use for ducting. That would work just as well. And I might touch up with that depending on how well this sprays. This is just the sleeve to show over there so you can see that it slides. It would slide over there. It's a pretty tight fit, but it works. And then I'll glue that in place right here after I've cut this down and spray painted this and this after gluing it. Just use a little bit of tape to keep this down. Here it is all filed down and cut, and that seemed to work out really well. Here's the sleeve all glued up using the rapid fuse. I filed it down a little on the inside so that it would be a flush fit, and I'm pretty happy how that turned out. So just held it for a little bit. It's all filed down, and now the spray painting occurs. I'm using silver paint. Spray painting has been finished. I used a metallic spray paint. Here's the gold piece. Now, I realize it's not an exact replica, but it's pretty close. I'm going to put some black tape under here and then glue it on the sides. And you can see I have the details here that I've cut out. So I just took a coat hanger, a bunch of paper, wadded it up. One thing I did do is, because the clearance is so tight on the inside, I took some painter's tape and sealed the inside before I painted to make sure that the surface inside stayed at the same width, diameter, what have you, so it will slide on easy. Here you can see I painted in the holes a little bit to get the detail, and then I'm just using an X-Acto knife cut out and define the area there. One thing I've learned about this build is it keeps evolving. Every time I think I've got a solution, I come up with a better idea. On this one, I initially spray painted it, but they didn't like the look. It still looked a little off. It looked more like this, and I'm looking more to blend in with the shine of this. I anticipated I might be doing that, so I had the aluminum tape, and it's exactly the same distance of this. which is a little different than that, but I don't think this is the scale. This is actually shorter than it should be. And I just laid some tape over that, and I really like the look of this. Cut out the windows. If you look at Rey's Last Jedi saber, it doesn't have this detail in it. At least some of the lightsabers don't. It has the more slide-on detail. This came out well. I used aluminum tape on this, and then on the side, that's what the regular paint looked like, and I just drew the line to represent this line right here. And the break in that part of the Graflex. I'm using a 1-inch sharkbite tube as my blade because I want something really rugged and tough that I can battle with. This is the sleeve that I made earlier. I found that I couldn't slide this in because of this nut was being a problem. So I took a file and actually just filed it down just enough so that the sharkbite easily slides in there. If you're like me, you have tons of these old connectors. RCA for all the VCRs and electronics that used to connect. Originally I started out with these ones that I had, and I just cut them off to make this detail here, because if you look in the video and it extends out. Okay, there's the hole here. I haven't done that. So you could use this and paint them gold with a marker, and that might work, and just hit it with a little clear coat. But I also found these gold connectors. I got these from a beat up cable. Got 4 of them, one on each side. And this cable with this RG6 connector that I'm using for the windows for $2 from Habitat for Humanity. I'm trying to use the spirit of the original lightsaber builds where they just took and hacked a bunch of stuff together. And I used this sharkbite 1-inch coupler, painted it with some black Krylon paint. That came out really well. Drilled the holes so that they would be right centered on both sides. And then I just took some of my now favorite rapid fuse super glue, like glue, and just glued that in place. I'm going to drill a hole here for this detail. I'm not going to do those windows. I think that's a little too much, but I did like the extension. Cut those a little less than this sleeve. You could cut them from the sleeve, but then they'll be a little long. And you really have to glue this piece in place, and that's what the sharkbite lightsaber blade will fit into. But you have to glue that in place and then put these in. On this build, I put these in first, and then I had to force those through and slide them down. But now I got smart on the other side, and I'm just going to cut these off and then use some rapid fuse glue. And I will tell you, this will not go. Once those things are in, they're not going anywhere. But I like the little extra detail. And you can see in the video below that I provide as my resource that's kind of right there. You can see in this plastic cheap model, they allude to it, but I just wanted the detail. You know, if you're going to go to all the trouble of making one, you might as well do it so that it's going to be as realistic as possible. Finding the right material for this and being satisfied for these 2 details was a journey, to say the least. I started out with a toothpaste cap, filed it down, and that's a close facsimile. And then I hit it with a silver Sharpie, hit it with a couple clear coats, and it gives a little bit of a reflective metallic like, but once again it's kind of like this plastic metal thing. So I wasn't completely satisfied with it. I wanted this look to really close up, have a fairly close resemblance to Rey's lightsaber. So I came up with this alternative where I used these RG60 or RG59 cable connectors. You can just order a bunch of them and just take this, cut this piece off. You have to basically auger out this whole piece here with a drill. It's a little bit of a work, but it came out well. And then for the lens, I just took a little rubber plastic bumper, peeled off the paint, and it's fairly clear. It's a little opaque, but that's going to be my detail here. And you have a little bit of a challenge with the cutouts here. So I took an old metal pen that I happen to have and filed down a little piece and then used that as a detail to get the flush mount. Get the flush mount like that. And I filed it down and I'm pretty happy the way that turned out. I'm going to drill a hole in so that will light up like it does on the regular Graflex. That's end of part 1 of the build. Look down below and you'll see a link to the final steps that completes this Ray lightsaber.